We're delighted to have you. Lots of exciting things going on in our community that we'll be talking about. But before we jump in, I wanted to mention a couple of things. First, let's talk about the upcoming Chamber Ball, which will be a week from Saturday night on March the 15th. It's our annual celebration for the community, recognize the people who really go above and beyond to make this area a better place and a better region. This year's theme is an evening in New York. It's going to be an incredible night, lots of fun, awards, dinner, and dancing, one that you won't want to miss. And if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, I'd encourage you to do so and do so quickly. On a much more somber note, I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment to remember our board chair, Jay Wendell. Jay's our chairman, and he just recently passed away. And I know to many that Jay was a dear friend, much more than just a leader in the community, but certainly has left an impact that is immeasurable for many individuals as well as to the community. And to honor his legacy, we've launched a Connor Wendell College Fund. Connor is Jay and Carrie's 17-year-old son, a senior at Hilton Head High School. And many have been looking for ways to honor and to recognize Jay, and we thought this would be a meaningful way to do just that. And if you'd like to contribute, donations can be dropped off at any Coastal States bank or also mailed, and you will see the mailing addresses for, or the mailing address, I should say, for Coastal States Bank right here in the chat box. Now, let's turn our attention to today's program. And always we encourage you to ask your questions, drop them in the chat box, and we'll certainly try to answer as many of those as we have time for. And so right now we have our first guest with us, and that's our State Senator Tom Davis, who's coming to us this morning from Columbia, where the South Carolina legislature is in session. Senator Davis currently serves as chairman of the Senate Labor, Commerce, and Industry Committee, while other assignments also include the banking and insurance, finance, legislative, and oversight, as well as medical affairs. And Senator Davis has been a key advocate for our region and has and continues to work tirelessly with our state, our county, and the town of Hilton Head Island, as well as the town of Bluffton, on the Highway 278 Bridge Corridor project. There was a resolution last night that was passed by the Hilton Head Island Town Council with a 6-1 vote. Senator Davis is going to explain a little bit what that means, the next step, and then what else we can expect moving forward. So Senator, welcome. We know you're on a tight schedule this morning. It's always good to see you, and I continue to say you have to be the hardest working senator in the state of South Carolina.
Well, you're very kind, Bill, and I appreciate you inviting me to speak to your group this morning. I'll start with what you just mentioned, Highway 278, the Bridge Corridor project. I do think that there is a developing consensus about the path forward there. We have about $300 million on hand, combination of infrastructure bank dollars, DOT dollars, and county sales tax dollars. And the consensus seems to be to take 250 or 260 million of that 300 million and build a new 3-lane eastbound span from Moss Creek, continuing eastward to Pinckney Island, and then continuing from Pinckney Island to Windmill Harbor. That new span to be constructed immediately to the south and parallel to the existing eastbound span. And then once that particular new span has been completed, the old span can be taken down. It leaves about $40 to $50 million to do on-island improvements, what I refer to as on-island improvements, to facilitate the free flow of traffic and to mitigate impacts of the Stony community from Windmill Harbor to the Cross Island Parkway exit. So I think there's a consensus there. My understanding is that Town Council yesterday approved that approach, but also encouraged the DOT when it issues its design build RFP to encourage bidders to come up with a proposal that provides for eastbound access on Jenkins Island, or Pinckney Island, excuse me, so that you don't have to double back. So I do think that the county will agree with that as well. Continuing the highway theme, our delegation has been working on securing funds to widen I-95 from the Georgia-South Carolina line to exit 8. That has been fully funded, permitted, engineered, and bids have been let. Contracts will be signed and construction will begin sometime later this summer on that expansion of I-95. But what we've also been doing, Bill, is focusing on we securing the funding for Exit 8 all the way to the Walterboro exits on I-95, 3 lanes in each direction. And that funding has now been secured. So we're in the process now, or DOT is in the process now of acquiring the rights of way and engineering, mitigating wetlands impacts for that expansion leg. And so the idea is once they're done with the first segment from the Georgia-South Carolina line to Exit 8, they can roll right into and do from Exit 8 to the Walterboro exit. So transportation and roads improvements have been a focal point for us, and those are 2 major projects. We're also debating right now some very important things in the South Carolina Senate. I've been working for the past year and a half on a comprehensive energy bill to make sure that we have a sufficient energy generation to meet what the projected needs of our state are in the years to come. And key to that is issuing RFPs to the private sector to have the private sector complete the nuclear units at VC Summer 2 and 3. If you remember, Santee Cooper and SCE&G spent about $9 billion on those 2 reactors and then abandoned the project in July of 2017. We have kept the assets on the ground in good condition just in case economic conditions changed and became viable to complete them. And what you're seeing now is an appetite in the private sector among hyperscalers like Google and Microsoft to build generation to service their AI and data center needs. So there has been an RFP issued by Santee Cooper to the private sector. There have been 45 responses to that RFP by the private sector. There is an appetite out there to acquire that asset and use private funds to complete it. And once it's completed, the sunk cost, the $9 billion, or a great portion of that $9 billion, which are still on ratepayers' base, you can take that off and provide relief to Dominion and Santee Cooper customers. So power and energy generation has been a focal point. And right now in the Senate, Bill, we are debating a tort reform bill to try to do something to lower insurance premiums. We've seen a spike in insurance premiums across the board, whether it's homeowners, liability, car, and we're trying to go ahead and do some reforms to our tort system that will lead to a reduction in those premiums. And we're debating that right now on the Senate floor. So that's just a snapshot of some of the things we're working on. But we also go into the budget in about 2 weeks here in the Senate. And I have in my mind, after talking to town council of Hilton Head and Bluffton Town Council and Beaufort County, what our area's priorities are. And I'll be working with our delegation to make sure that they're funded.
All right, Senator, thank you for that update. Thank you. We have some questions coming in. And the first question is coming from Mark. And Mark is asking, what is the estimated time frame for the Bridge Corridor project by SCDOT?
I think, if things go as I expect they will, there'll be a resolution in regard to what part of the project can we do now. There'll be an adjustment of the intergovernmental agreement between the county and the state infrastructure bank, because the current intergovernmental agreement contemplates the $120 million grant from the infrastructure bank being, applied to complete an entire project, both eastbound and westbound spans. So we need to modify that IGA. We then need to go ahead and have the project as incrementally proposed engineered to a point where the DOT can issue RFPs to the private sector to get responsive bids. My understanding is that RFP would be finalized and issued sometime the beginning of next year. But it really depends upon working with the infrastructure bank and working with the Federal Highway Administration on these adjustments to the project. Once the RFP has been issued, bids will be received. And that particular RFP is going to be on a design build context, as I indicated, encouraging bidders to propose solutions that involve access to Pinckney Island eastbound. So points will be awarded for bidders that propose plans that have that access. So that process will take several months, I would imagine, next year. And then once you have bids secured and you make a selection, you go to contract. So you're probably talking at that point about the end of 2026. So that's sort of a thumbnail sketch of what we're talking about. And in terms of construction time, I believe it's a 1.5 year project. So you're into 2027. So it's important to have this sense of time when we're talking about this. We're okay with the structure of the bridges right now. Even the most immediate eastbound span from Windmill Harbor crossing to Pinckney Island, which is the most structurally deficient of the spans, that is okay for that period of time. So we're not in a situation where we're going to have a shutdown or one lane or constricting access to Hilton Head. So that's my estimate of what the time frame is.
All right, thank you. And Tim is asking for you to talk a little bit about your chairmanship for the Senate Labor, Commerce, and Industry Committee and what that means.
Right. I mean, that particular committee is in charge of all the regulations on our state's books in regards to professions and occupations. And one of the things that I've been doing during the year or so that I've been chairman of LCI is looking at all the regs that we have on the books and then systematically updating them and making sure that the regs we have in place are only those strictly necessary to protect the public and that there isn't anything extraneous or overburdensome. And what I'm finding as we go through the code is a lot of these regulations were put in place decades ago, and you've seen best practices in the industries and professions and occupations being regulated. You've seen best practices change, and we haven't had the regulations updated to correspond with the changes. So that is ongoing work. And interestingly, we're using AI technology to comprehensively look at our regulations and then to flag those that are obsolete or inconsistent with best practices. And that then triggers an analysis by us on how to streamline them. So it's a tedious task, but it's an extremely important one because every regulation you have that isn't necessary to protect the public good is an unwarranted cost that's then passed on to the consumer. So I enjoy being an LCI chairman. I enjoy the work that we do, and I think it's important to our economy.
Joan is asking for an update on the school voucher debate.
The House has passed their version. And first of all, let's back up. And what we're talking about here is providing for a limited number of individuals on a means-based test to select and go to a school of their choice, as opposed to going to the school where they've been zoned. And the idea here is, and it's the idea that I bring to every aspect of public policy, that whenever the providers of something have to compete and whenever the consumers of that something have choices, you end up with a better product at a lower cost. And so the idea behind school choice is giving the consumer, in this case, the parents, the ability to select a provider, in this case, the schools, that best serves their needs. And it's the idea that that market dynamic will promote better outcomes at a lower cost. The difference between the Senate proposal and the House proposal is in terms of funding. The Senate proposal has some lottery dollars that are generated by the lottery going to fund that program. The House version has the program funded out of general fund revenues. And so there's a disconnect between the House and the Senate in regard to how to fund that program. And so what will happen now is there'll be members of the House and members of the Senate that will get together in a conference committee, and they'll try to reconcile those two versions of the school choice bill. But I think it's safe to say that we are, at the end of the day, before we adjourn in May, we will have a fairly robust school choice program on the books in South Carolina.
Thank you, Senator. Marty is asking, is it feasible that South Carolina can compete with Georgia and North Carolina on energy to fill huge needs with AI and other platforms?
I think so. I mean, South Carolina, really, if you look at our power generation, we're unique. 55% of our power generation is nuclear. We have tremendous nuclear expertise here in South Carolina, the Savannah River Lab as well. As I say, we've got those two partially completed reactors at VC Summer, just north of Columbia. And I'm very encouraged with the private sector stepping up and indicating an interest to privately finance and complete those reactors. You've seen that done elsewhere. For instance, 3 Mile Island up in Pennsylvania, Microsoft really recently announced a deal where it's going to bring that out of storage, upfit it, bring it online with its own dollars. So I think we've really tapped into something here. We've tapped into the willingness and eagerness, frankly, of the private sector to go and finance generation on their balance sheet. I think that we're well positioned to do that. We've got two assets that are partially complete, one 20%, one 40%. So I'm very encouraged about our ability to have power generation to meet our needs.
All right, thank you. Jim is asking if Buc-ee's was taken into consideration with the I-95 design.
It was, and one of the things, as we're designing these interchanges, whether it's the new exit 3 interchange or whether it's the existing exit 8 interchange, and then you've got the I-95 improvements, what DOT has done is it has factored in proposed economic development, and Bucky's is a part of that. So some of the delays in regard to the I-95 widening have been because of those engineering decisions, those engineering challenges to accommodate and to adjust plans to accommodate that kind of growth. So, but Bucky's has been incorporated into those plans.
Thank you. Tom is asking, are there opportunities to partner with private sector partners on energy with Google and others?
Yeah, that's what I indicated with VC Summer 2 and 3. And it's really a new way of looking at how to meet our power needs. Historically, we looked at 3 utilities. We've got 3 utilities in South Carolina, each with a territorial monopoly. You've got Santee Cooper, a state-owned power company, Duke Energy, and Dominion. And typically, we look to those utilities to provide power generation and power to the grid. This approach, in terms of Santee Cooper, the owner of the assets at VC Summer 2 and 3, issuing RFPs to the private sector and soliciting bids from the private sector to purchase that asset and complete construction of it, is a new way of going about power generation. It's not looking solely to the utility, it's looking to the private sector, and it's looking to these hyperscale users that have balance sheets that can afford this type of large-scale power generation development. So I do think that is an important part of the future, unlocking the private sector, letting them use their capital, letting them use their expertise, and we're moving in that direction.
All right, thank you. Robert is asking if you think that the tariffs in D.C. will have an impact on the automotive industry in South Carolina.
I think that it will. Federal tax policy is a little bit beyond my pay grade, but I think anytime you're talking about imposing tariffs, you are going to have effects on what's exported and what's imported. The market will sort that out. I think it's too early to say exactly, what effect it's going to have. I mean, for us here in South Carolina, I mean, we're a tremendous export state, particularly BMW in the upstate. The number of BMWs that are built up in Greenville, Spartanburg area and shipped out of Charleston is just tremendous. And so I'll be watching carefully. Not that I can do anything about it in terms of the tariffs, but in terms of economic impact on South Carolina, that is one metric I'm looking at very closely. What impact does it have on those BMW exports?
Susan is asking for an update on tort reform.
Yeah, we're debating that right now on the floor of the South Carolina Senate. And the key part of tort reform, and there's many pieces, but the major piece is this, the whole notion of joint and several liability, where if there is an accident and the plaintiff sues 2 or 3 defendants that were involved or maybe approximate cause of that accident, the way the law is right now, any one of those defendants can be held liable for 100% of the damages. So even if you're 5% at fault or 10% at fault in terms of the accident occurring, current law allows the plaintiff to recover 100% of the damages against that individual. So the heart of tort reform that we're debating right now is aligning a party's culpability and percentage of negligence with their obligation to pay the total damage award. So in other words, if the jury finds that a particular defendant is 15% at fault or causing the accident, that particular defendant would pay 15% of the total amount of damages, whereas currently right now, that individual who is found to be 15% at fault would be liable for up to 100% of the damages. So there are other pieces to tort reform, and there's more nuances, and I don't mean to suggest it's as simplistic as that. But when you hear tort reform, that issue of what's called joint and several liability is at the heart of it.
Senator, thank you. I know that you have a 9:45. Thank you for being with us this morning. I feel like it was a little bit of rapid fire, questions. And thank you very much for your thoughtful answers, your leadership, and what you're doing in South Carolina as well as here in Beaufort County.
Thanks for having me, Bill. I appreciate it. See you Saturday. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. All right, our Senator Tom Davis. Well, we've talked about projects in the future, so now let's take a little bit of a look and talk about history and how history is taking place and brought to life in Bluffton. And we're fortunate this morning to be joined by Glenn Umberger, and he's the town of Bluffton's historic preservationist. Not everyone really realizes that Bluffton has a full-time historian on staff, and Glenn plays that role in keeping the town's history alive and telling the story. Recently, the town also celebrated the grand opening of the Bluffton Welcome Center at the Squire Pope Carriage House in Wright Family Park. And boy, I've got to tell you, it's a stunning location. And if you haven't seen that waterfront piece of property, I would encourage you to go out and to enjoy the park. Glenn, we're glad to have you with us and look forward to you sharing your thoughts with us this morning.
Thank you so much. So I'm Glenn Oliver, the Historic Preservationist for the town of Bluffton. Thank you again for the opportunity to share with you about our recently completed public project. Now, if you've spent any time in Old Town Bluffton over the last 2 years, you may have noticed a rather large construction project taking place at the foot of Calhoun Street across from the Church of the Cross. That project involved a multi-year, multi-million-dollar effort to rescue an abandoned historic structure and rehabilitate it into the town's Welcome Center, which today serves as the official gateway to Bluffton. And like most historic preservation projects, this one came with challenges and a few surprises. It required money. After all, historic preservation isn't cheap, it's priceless, and was successful thanks to a team of dedicated professionals who had the vision to bring a historic residence on the brink of demolition back to life. So to start, in May of 2017, the town of Bluffton and Beaufort County jointly purchased the 1.27 acre property for $1.5 million through the county's Rural and Critical Lands Preservation Program, a program that since 2000 has preserved over 25,000 acres for conservation, parks, buffers, scenic vistas, and for the preservation of valuable economic and natural resources. Staff immediately began to implement plans to create a public park named the Wright Family Park, which was completed in December 2020. Among other amenities, the park provides public access to the May River in an area where most access to this vital tidal estuary is located on private property. In addition to creating the park, future plans at the time included the rehabilitation of the Squire Pope Carriage House. What we call the Squire Pope Carriage House originally was 3 outbuildings that in 1868, when Squire Pope's widow and daughter returned to Bluffton after the Civil War, were cobbled together without an architect, engineer, or interior designer to form the core of what later would become known simply as the Squire Pope Carriage House. Subsequent owners over the next 140 years would alter the house to make it more stylish and comfortable. It's the desire of the Wright family, the last family to occupy the house, when they sold the property in 2017, that the house will be a place of remembrance and of understanding. It is our hope that this will become a cherished preservation victory. Now that the project is finished, I truly believe this is a preservation victory. Of course, there are always challenges in working with a historic structure, especially with one that had been left vacant for nearly a decade, except for the family of Raccoon that most recently had occupied the home. The rehabilitation process officially began on February 2nd, 2023, with selective demolition of non-historic elements and 3 brick chimneys. The next step involved an extensive structural stabilization. And since the house originally had been 3 separate outbuildings that were sitting directly on the ground, it was raised in 2 pieces onto cribbing about 6 feet in the air. A new foundation was then constructed, and the structure was lowered back down onto its new elevated base. The brick chimneys were reconstructed using reclaimed historic brick. Windows and doors were carefully removed and restored. A new metal roof was fabricated in an historic color, and new exterior siding material was installed once termite-damaged structural elements were repaired. Missing architectural features were also recreated, but these were not the only challenges we faced. Since the structure's use was being changed from residential to commercial, significant upgrades were required, such as fire and life safety and ADA accessibility, but historic elements were retained wherever practical. Of course, for my female colleagues whose offices are located now on the upper floor, navigating the historic pine stairs in high heel shoes presents its own particular challenge. To note another challenge we faced, which lies in the structure's name. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the name Squire Pope Carriage House is actually a misnomer, since we found no forensic proof that any of the original 3 outbuildings actually served that function. Nevertheless, it remains the Squire Pope Carriage House for all official purposes. It goes without saying that this project was a team effort from day one when the town and county jointly purchased the property. For the actual rehabilitation, the town partnered with SCAD Pro, a collaborative design studio at the Savannah College of Art and Design that connects current and future art and design professionals with business leaders to find creative and inventive solutions to real-world challenges. A cohort of 17 students designed initial concepts for the new 540 square foot Welcome Center during the fall academic quarter of 2023. Metters Inc. of Charleston served as our preservation architects, while Huff Inc., also of Charleston, was our general contractor. Hot Metal Media produced a series of inspirational and educational videos about the history, culture, and life of the town that will now be shown at the Welcome Center. Deep South Creative turned SCAD Pro's conceptual designs into reality with new Welcome Center fixtures and displays. Some of those fixtures include a love letters to Bluffton kiosk, where visitors can write their own personal postcards expressing what they think makes Bluffton a special place. These comments will be used in future displays at the center. We also get to showcase some of the nearly 3,000 artifacts that were recovered from the Wright Family Park during its construction by volunteer archaeologists in 2019. We have spent about $2.7 million with funding provided through a combination of grants, hospitality tax revenues, and local and state ATAX funds, as shown here. This was in addition to the $1.5 million cost to purchase the property in 2017. The town's share was $750,000, and the $1.6 million cost to create Wright Family Park in 2020, which included infrastructure, landscaping, and a set of informational signs about Squire Pope and the Wright family, which were also installed to inform visitors about the importance of this site. I thought it might be interesting to share a few of the hidden secrets or fun facts about the newly opened Welcome Center. The entrance features the old Wright family bronze door knocker, which the family had donated for the project, which sat in a box here at Town Hall for nearly 2 years before it was reinstalled on the front door. And the green paint is actually a historic color that we found underneath many layers of other paint. In addition to the displays of artifacts, the Welcome Center features historic maps, photographs, and a timeline of significant events in the history of South Carolina and in the town of Bluffton. We even installed a time capsule within the walls of the house to commemorate the successful rehabilitation of the Squire Pope Carriage House, with the hope that future generations may one day recognize the hard work involved to breathe new life into one of Bluffton's most historic homes. We do hope that you will make it a point to come visit us at the Town of Bluffton Welcome Center at the Squire Pope Carriage House, located at 111 Calhoun Street in Bluffton. We'd love to show you around. Thank you.
All right, Glenn, thank you. Appreciate that. We have a few questions here this morning, and the first one is coming from Brad, and Brad is asking, what's happening across the street from the new Welcome Center?
There is a construction project going on across the street, and that's a private project, and that project will actually be heard tonight at our regular Historic Preservation Commission meeting at 6 o'clock here at Town Hall. So I can give you more information about that at 6 p.m. tonight. But that's a private project and not a public project.
Thank you. And Samantha is asking, what if the Welcome Center can be used or rented for private events?
We're not set up to rent it out for private events. The Welcome Center is rather small. As I mentioned, it's 540 square feet, which is a small space, but it's designed to be a welcome center and not an event space. The space in Wright Family Park, however, is available for public rental, and you can contact us at the Town of Bluffton. Lindy Simino is our manager of those rentals, and you can rent that space.
Dan is asking, what's the next big Bluffton restoration project?
So the next one on my list is the Sarah Riley Hooks Cottage, which is number 76 Bridge Street, about around the corner from the new Welcome Center. That will be a public project that is going through design review right now. Will kick off hopefully later this year. And that project will be rehabilitating a historic residence into a artist in residence use space for future use.
All right. Jamie is asking, how does Bluffton treat a contributing structure versus a historic structure?
Really, it's the same thing. Contributing structures are basically historic structures that town council has deemed to be important and placed on the contributing resources list. So those are treated with a higher level of care with regards to alterations, additions, things of that nature. But to answer the question, basically, historic structures and contributing resources are in essence the same thing.
All right. Donald is asking, what was Seven Oaks originally used for?
Seven Oaks was actually a summer cottage that the family built back before the Civil War. It was one of the largest summer cottages in Bluffton at the time. Over the years, it became other uses. At one point, it was a boarding house. Rose to fame at for one particular instance. There was a party going on. Shots were fired. Somebody was killed up on room 13. The bloodstains are allegedly still on the floor. That pretty much ended its time as a boarding house. It became other things, and now it's one of our more interesting contributing resources.
Thank you. Debbie is asking, what are two of the most projects that you've done restoration-wise in Bluffton or other places that most excite you?
For Bluffton, I would have to say the Welcome Center was probably the most exciting project I worked on. It was the biggest project I've worked on to date, so I think that one goes without saying. In my previous role as the manager of special projects for the New York Landmarks Conservancy in Manhattan, I was on the Section 106 review panel for the TWA hotel conversion at JFK Airport, which was a lot of fun to work on. Seeing such a big project taking place. And I can tell you a lot about penny tile for flooring of that particular hotel. I learned a lot about penny tile that I never thought I'd ever need to know, but I think I'm probably an expert on it now.
That's great, Glenn. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that about you, but have stayed in that hotel, and
Yeah.
what a work of art it is.
Yes, it is.
Glenn, I want to thank you for being with us, and look forward to having you back on as we continue to make progress in Bluffton.
Great. Thank you so much. This was a real joy.
Good. All right. Thank you. Well, that's going to do it for today. Mark your calendars for next month. Power Hour is going to be on April 2nd, when we'll have United States Senator Lindsey Graham with us, talking about everything that's going on in the nation's capital. And then we'll bring it a little bit closer to home, and we'll also have Steve Wilmot with the RBC Heritage presented by Boeing with us to talk about the upcoming tournament and hear all of the exciting things that are going on with the tournament. Again, want to thank you for tuning in today. Thanks Senator Davis and Glenn for being with us as well. We look forward to seeing you real soon. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.